What if everything you thought you knew about ancient Mesopotamia was built on a foundation of forgotten greatness? Deep beneath the sands of modern-day Iraq, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of an empire so powerful, so advanced, that it rewrote the entire political landscape of the ancient world more than 4,000 years ago. Yet most people have never heard its name. The year is 2334 before Christ. The Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers buzzes with the activity of dozens of independent city-states. Each one fights desperately for control of trade routes, water rights, and the precious agricultural land that sustains civilization itself. The air is thick with the smoke of bronze forges and the dust kicked up by merchant caravans traveling between Uruk, and Lagash. But in a small city called Akkad, something unprecedented is about to unfold. A man whose very name would become synonymous with conquest is preparing to do something no ruler in human history has ever accomplished. He will unite not just a few neighboring territories, but virtually the entire known world under a single crown. His empire will stretch from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, encompassing nearly 2 million square kilometers and countless diverse peoples, languages, and cultures. This is the story of the Akkadian Empire, the world's first true multi-ethnic empire, and its legendary founder, Sargon of Akkad. For over 180 years, from 2334 to 2154 before Christ, the Akkadians wielded power that would not be seen again until the rise of Babylon, Assyria, and Persia. They created the first professional standing army, established the world's earliest postal system, and developed administrative techniques that would influence governance for millennia to come. Yet despite their monumental achievements, the Akkadians have been overshadowed by the more famous civilizations that followed. Their cuneiform tablets lie scattered in museums around the world, their cities buried under layers of sand and time, their incredible story known only to scholars and archaeologists who have dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth about humanity's first empire. The mystery runs deeper than mere historical oversight. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that the Akkadian Empire was far more sophisticated, far more influential, and far more dramatic in its rise and fall than anyone previously understood. New translations of ancient texts have uncovered palace intrigues, military innovations, and cultural achievements that rival anything produced by their more famous successors. But to understand how a single man could forge the world's first empire from the fractured city-states of ancient Mesopotamia, we must journey back to a time when writing was still new, when bronze was cutting-edge technology, and when the very concept of uniting different peoples under one rule was revolutionary beyond comprehension. The world of 2400 before Christ bears little resemblance to the unified nations we know today. Mesopotamia is a patchwork of fiercely independent city-states, each ruled by kings who claim divine mandate and guard their territories with religious fervor. Dominates the south with its magnificent ziggurat piercing the sky, while Uruk boasts the world's largest population and most advanced writing system. To the north, Mari controls crucial trade routes along the Euphrates, and Ebla grows wealthy from commerce with distant lands. These cities exist in a constant state of controlled chaos. One season they might be allies, trading grain for precious metals, sharing irrigation techniques, or joining forces against nomadic raiders from the desert. The next season could find them at each other's throats over water rights, territorial boundaries, or perceived slights to their patron deities. The political landscape shifts like desert sand, with alliances forming and dissolving based on marriages, military victories, and the whims of rulers who believe themselves chosen by the gods. Into this fractured world steps a figure whose origins are shrouded in legend, and whose very existence challenges everything historians thought they knew about ancient leadership. Sargon of Akkad emerges from obscurity sometime around 2334 before Christ, but his rise to power reads like something from mythology rather than recorded history. According to the ancient texts discovered in the ruins of Nineveh, Sargon's birth story rivals that of Moses or Romulus in its dramatic elements. His mother, a temple priestess forbidden from bearing children, places her infant son in a basket of reeds and sets him adrift on the Euphrates River. The baby is rescued by Aki, a royal gardener, who raises the child as his own. But even these humble beginnings cannot contain the extraordinary ambition that will soon reshape the ancient world. Archaeological evidence suggests that Sargon begins his career not as a king or nobleman, but as a cupbearer to Ur-Zababa, the king of Kish. This position, while appearing menial to modern eyes, actually places him at the very heart of political power. Ancient Near Eastern cupbearers were trusted advisors who had daily access to their rulers, who knew state secrets, and who often served as diplomatic messengers. It is the perfect position for an ambitious young man to learn statecraft, military strategy, and the art of political manipulation. The tablets tell us that Sargon possesses qualities that set him apart from the typical court officials of his time. He demonstrates an unusual understanding of different languages and cultures, speaking fluent Sumerian despite his Akkadian heritage. He shows remarkable skill in reading people's motivations and desires, a talent that will prove crucial in his future conquests. Most importantly, he possesses an almost supernatural ability to inspire loyalty among soldiers and civilians alike. But it is Sargon's revolutionary military thinking that truly distinguishes him from his contemporaries. While other rulers rely on citizen militias and temporary conscripts who return to their farms after brief campaigns, Sargon begins to envision something unprecedented: a professional standing army of career soldiers whose only loyalty is to their commander and whose only occupation is warfare. This concept challenges the fundamental structure of Mesopotamian society. Traditional city-state armies consist of farmers and craftsmen who fight during the dry season and return to their regular occupations when the floods come. They fight primarily to defend their homes, their temples, and their way of life. They have little interest in distant conquests or prolonged campaigns that would interfere with planting and harvest seasons. Sargon's revolutionary army operates under completely different principles. His soldiers are professionals who train year-round, who perfect their skills with bronze weapons and composite bows, and who are paid with regular shares of conquest spoils rather than seasonal wages. They march longer distances, fight in harsher conditions, and remain loyal to their commander rather than to any particular city or deity. The transformation of Mesopotamian warfare begins subtly. Sargon starts by recruiting disaffected younger sons of noble families, men who have little hope of inheriting land or titles under the traditional system. He offers them something their birth circumstances deny: the chance for wealth, glory, and advancement based on merit rather than bloodline. He supplements these recruits with skilled fighters from nomadic tribes, men who know the desert routes and possess superior archery skills. Training takes place in secret locations outside the major cities, away from the prying eyes of established rulers who might recognize the threat these innovations represent. Sargon develops new tactical formations that maximize the effectiveness of bronze weapons and composite bows. His soldiers learn to fight in coordinated units rather than as individual warriors seeking personal glory. They master siege techniques, river crossings, and rapid marching that allows them to appear unexpectedly at enemy gates. The political situation in Mesopotamia provides the perfect opportunity for Sargon to test his military innovations. Around 2334 before Christ, tensions escalate between several major city-states over control of irrigation canals. A drought has reduced water levels in both the Tigris and Euphrates, forcing difficult decisions about water allocation. Traditional diplomatic solutions fail as each city prioritizes its own survival over regional cooperation. Lugalzage C, the powerful king of Uruk, attempts to establish hegemony over his neighbors through a series of military campaigns. His initial successes alarm other rulers, who begin forming defensive alliances. The stage is set for a conflict that could reshape the entire region, but none of the traditional powers anticipate that the ultimate victor will come from a previously insignificant city called Akkad. Sargon makes his move with characteristic boldness and precision. Rather than attempting to mediate between the warring factions or aligning himself with the strongest side, he presents himself as a third alternative, a unifier who can bring peace through strength rather than through the endless cycle of revenge and counter-revenge that has characterized Mesopotamian politics for generations. His first major victory comes against Uarzababa, his former master, who has grown suspicious of his cupbearer's growing influence and popularity among the troops. The battle demonstrates everything that makes Sargon's military innovations so effective. While Uarzababa's forces fight according to traditional patterns, with individual champions engaging in single combat while armies watch, Sargon's professional soldiers move in coordinated formations that overwhelm their opponents through superior tactics and discipline. But what happens next will demonstrate that Sargon possesses not only military genius, but also political wisdom that surpasses anything seen before in the ancient world. Instead of simply replacing one king with another, he begins to implement a completely new concept of governance that will transform not just Mesopotamia, but the entire ancient world. But what no one expected was that Sargon's victory over Kish was merely the opening move in a campaign that would unite virtually the entire known world under a single crown, creating administrative and military challenges that no ruler in history had ever faced before. The conquest of Kish sends shockwaves throughout Mesopotamia, but not for the reasons one might expect. Traditional warfare in the ancient world follows predictable patterns. Armies clash, one side wins, tribute is paid, and life continues much as before until the next seasonal conflict. Sargon shatters these expectations by doing something unprecedented in human history. He keeps his army in the field and immediately marches toward his next target. Within months of his victory at Kish, Sargon's forces appear at the gates of Uruk, the most powerful city-state in Sumer. The speed of his advance catches everyone off guard. Traditional armies would have returned home to celebrate, distribute spoils, and tend to their farms. Sargon's professional soldiers have no farms to tend, no seasonal obligations to fulfill. They exist solely to fight, and their commander intends to use this advantage to its fullest extent. The siege of Uruk becomes a masterclass in innovative military strategy. Rather than attempting to storm the city's massive walls, Sargon demonstrates tactical brilliance that will influence siege warfare for millennia. His engineers divert water from the irrigation canals that supply the city, while his archers maintain constant harassment of defenders on the walls. Most importantly, he begins negotiating separately with different factions within the city, offering generous terms to those who surrender early while promising harsh treatment for those who resist. This psychological warfare proves devastatingly effective. Lugalzaj, the king of Uruk who had been attempting his own campaign of regional conquest, finds himself increasingly isolated as his own nobles begin secret negotiations with the Akkadian forces outside their gates. The city falls not through military assault, but through the collapse of internal unity in the face of Sargon's superior political strategy. The capture of Lugalzaj marks a pivotal moment in ancient history. Rather than simply executing his rival or demanding tribute, Sargon makes a decision that reveals the true scope of his ambitions. He places the defeated king in a neck stock and parades him before the temple of Enlil in Nippur, the religious center of Sumer. This dramatic gesture serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates his power to the Sumerian priesthood, legitimizes his conquest through religious ceremony, and sends an unmistakable message to other rulers throughout the region. But the most revolutionary aspect of Sargon's victory lies not in his military tactics, but in his administrative innovations. Previous conquerors had simply imposed tribute payments and left existing power structures intact. Sargon begins implementing something entirely new: direct imperial administration that replaces local rulers with appointed governors answerable only to him. The implications of this administrative revolution cannot be overstated. For the first time in human history, a single ruler is attempting to govern diverse peoples with different languages, customs, and religious beliefs under a unified system. The challenges are enormous. How do you maintain loyalty among subjects who have never owed allegiance to anyone beyond their city walls? How do you collect taxes from populations that have never paid tribute to distant rulers? How do you prevent rebellions in territories hundreds of miles from your capital? Sargon's solutions demonstrate political genius that rivals his military innovations. Rather than trying to impose Akkadian culture on conquered peoples, he adopts a policy of cultural synthesis that allows local traditions to continue while introducing unified standards for trade, law, and administration. Sumerian remains the language of religious ceremony and learning, while Akkadian becomes the language of government and commerce. Local deities continue to receive worship, but now under the protection of Akkadian imperial authority. The speed of Sargon's subsequent conquests defies everything historians thought they knew about ancient warfare. Within a single decade, his armies sweep through virtually the entire Fertile Crescent. They capture Mari, gaining control of crucial trade routes along the Euphrates. They march west to the Mediterranean, subduing the coastal cities of modern-day Lebanon and Syria. They push north into Anatolia, establishing Akkadian authority over territories that will not see unified rule again until the rise of the Hittite Empire. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophistication of Sargon's military machine during these rapid conquests. Supply depots appear along major routes, positioned exactly one day's march apart for optimal logistics. Standardized weapons and equipment suggest centralized production facilities that can outfit thousands of soldiers with identical gear. Administrative tablets found at sites throughout the empire show a communication network that can relay messages from the capital to distant provinces in a matter of weeks rather than months. The conquest of Ebla in modern-day Syria provides perhaps the most dramatic example of Sargon's revolutionary approach to empire building. This wealthy trading city had maintained independence for centuries through diplomatic skill and economic power rather than military might. When Sargon's army arrives at their gates, the rulers of Ebla attempt traditional diplomatic solutions. They offer tribute, propose marriage alliances, and suggest trade agreements that would make military conquest unnecessary. Sargon's response reveals the fundamental difference between his imperial vision and traditional Mesopotamian politics. He accepts the tribute but keeps the city under siege. He welcomes the marriage alliance but demands that Ebla's rulers acknowledge Akkadian sovereignty. He agrees to trade relationships but insists that all commercial activity conform to imperial standards and regulations. The message is clear. The age of independent city-states is ending, and a new era of unified empire is beginning. The fall of Ebla provides Sargon with something even more valuable than its famous wealth: access to the vast archives that document trade relationships throughout the ancient world. These thousands of cuneiform tablets reveal commercial networks stretching from Afghanistan to Egypt, diplomatic correspondence with rulers as far away as Anatolia and the Iranian plateau, and detailed records of tribute payments and trade agreements that map the economic structure of the entire ancient Near East. Armed with this intelligence, Sargon begins planning campaigns that will extend Akkadian authority far beyond the traditional boundaries of Mesopotamian power. His armies march south into the Persian Gulf region, establishing control over the trade routes that bring precious goods from the Indus Valley. They push east toward the Zagros Mountains, subjugating peoples who have never before acknowledged foreign authority. Most remarkably, they campaign west toward Egypt and south toward the Arabian Peninsula, extending Akkadian influence into territories that previous Mesopotamian rulers had considered impossibly remote. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed the true extent of Sargon's conquests through evidence that challenges everything historians previously believed about the limitations of ancient imperial power. Akkadian administrative tablets have been found in sites throughout Turkey, Iran, and the Levant. Standardized weights and measures bearing Sargon's name appear in archaeological contexts from the Caucasus Mountains to the shores of the Red Sea. Most dramatically, inscriptions referring to Akkadian authority have been discovered in locations more than 1,000 miles from the empire's capital. But perhaps the most significant discovery lies in what these archaeological finds reveal about the internal structure of Sargon's empire. Unlike the loose confederations that characterized previous Mesopotamian alliances, the Akkadian Empire operates as a truly integrated political and economic system. Provincial governors report directly to the capital through a sophisticated courier network. Tax collection follows standardized procedures implemented throughout the empire. Legal disputes are resolved according to imperial law codes that supersede local customs and traditions. The implications of this administrative revolution extend far beyond mere political control. For the first time in human history, people from vastly different cultural backgrounds begin to see themselves as subjects of a common authority. Merchants from Anatolia conduct business with traders from the Persian Gulf using common currency and legal frameworks. Craftsmen in Syria learn techniques developed in Sumerian workshops. Religious practices begin to blend as imperial policy encourages cultural exchange while maintaining local traditions. Yet this unprecedented experiment in imperial governance faces challenges that test even Sargon's remarkable political skills. Managing an empire that spans millions of square kilometers and encompasses dozens of different ethnic groups requires administrative innovations that push the limits of ancient technology and organization. Communication delays mean that orders from the capital may take weeks or months to reach distant provinces. Cultural differences create conflicts that cannot be resolved through military force alone. Most critically, the very success of Akkadian expansion creates new enemies and new challenges that threaten the stability of the entire imperial system. However, what was about to unfold would surpass all expectations and reveal secrets that had remained hidden for millennia, as Sargon's greatest challenge would come not from external enemies, but from within his own empire, leading to discoveries that would reshape our understanding of ancient political power forever. The year is 2279 before Christ, and Sargon of Akkad has been ruling his vast empire for over 50 years. From his palace in Akkad, he can survey territories that stretch from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, encompassing more land and more diverse peoples than any ruler in human history has ever controlled. Yet recent archaeological discoveries reveal that his greatest challenge is not coming from external enemies or rebellious provinces, but from a crisis that strikes at the very heart of his imperial system. Climate data extracted from ancient lake sediments and tree rings tells a story that historians are only now beginning to understand. Around 2280 before Christ, the entire region experiences the onset of a severe drought that will last for nearly 2 centuries. This is not the typical seasonal variation that Mesopotamian farmers have learned to manage through irrigation and storage. This is a fundamental shift in weather patterns that reduces rainfall across the entire empire by nearly 40%. The implications for Sargon's empire are catastrophic. The sophisticated agricultural system that supports millions of people begins to collapse as irrigation canals run dry and crop yields plummet. The trade networks that bind distant provinces to the imperial capital start to break down as communities focus on local survival rather than long-distance commerce. Most critically, the tax revenues that fund the professional army and imperial administration decline sharply as provincial economies struggle to produce surplus goods. Sargon's response to this crisis demonstrates the same innovative thinking that characterized his military conquests, but now applied to challenges that no ruler has ever faced. He orders the construction of massive grain storage facilities throughout the empire, creating the world's first systematic famine relief program. He reorganizes trade routes to bring food from less affected regions to areas experiencing severe shortages. Most remarkably, he begins implementing what modern economists would recognize as deficit spending, using imperial reserves to maintain essential services even as tax revenues decline. But the drought reveals fundamental weaknesses in the Akkadian imperial system that even Sargon's political genius cannot completely overcome. The empire's vast size, which had been its greatest strength during times of prosperity, becomes a liability when rapid communication and resource redistribution become matters of life and death. Provincial governors, faced with starving populations and declining authority, begin making independent decisions that prioritize local needs over imperial unity. The first serious rebellion erupts not in the distant provinces, but in the traditional Sumerian heartland that had been the foundation of Sargon's original conquests. The city of Nippur, sacred center of Mesopotamian religion, becomes the focal point of resistance led by Sumerian priests who argue that the drought represents divine punishment for abandoning traditional ways of governance. They claim that the gods favor the old system of independent city-states over Sargon's revolutionary imperial model. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the sophistication of both the rebellion and Sargon's response. Cuneiform tablets found in temple archives show that the rebels developed their own administrative system, complete with standardized weights and measures and coordinated military commands. They establish alternative trade networks that bypass imperial control and create diplomatic relationships with groups outside Akkadian authority. Most significantly, they begin offering an alternative vision of post-drought recovery that appeals to populations throughout the empire. Sargon's counteroffensive demonstrates that age has not diminished his strategic brilliance. Rather than attempting to crush the rebellion through pure military force, he launches a sophisticated campaign that combines military pressure with political maneuvering and religious diplomacy. He negotiates separate agreements with individual temple complexes, offering religious autonomy in exchange for political loyalty. He implements new tax policies that reduce imperial demands on drought-affected regions while maintaining essential services. Most cleverly, he begins incorporating Sumerian religious symbolism into imperial ceremonies, presenting himself not as a foreign conqueror but as a divinely chosen protector of all Mesopotamian peoples. The climax of this internal conflict comes with the siege of Nippur, but recent archaeological discoveries reveal that the outcome was determined not by military action but by a remarkable feat of ancient engineering. While his army maintains pressure on the city walls, Sargon orders the construction of an artificial lake that diverts floodwater from the Euphrates River directly to Nippur's agricultural districts. This demonstration of imperial resources and technical capability convinces the city's population that their survival depends on imperial support rather than independence. But the most significant revelation about Sargon's reign comes from tablets discovered in the ruins of his palace, documents that remained untranslated until advanced computer analysis techniques made it possible to decode their heavily damaged cuneiform script. These administrative records reveal that Sargon was planning something even more ambitious than his territorial conquests: a complete transformation of ancient society based on merit rather than birth, on imperial citizenship rather than local tribal identity, and on technological innovation rather than traditional agricultural methods. The palace tablets describe plans for massive public works projects designed to make the empire drought-resistant through improved water management, expanded irrigation networks, and strategic grain reserves. They outline educational programs intended to create a literate administrative class drawn from all ethnic groups within the empire rather than just traditional Mesopotamian elites. Most remarkably, they detail military innovations including new bronze-working techniques, improved siege engines, and logistical systems that could support armies campaigning thousands of miles from their home bases. These documents reveal that Sargon understood something that would not be fully grasped again until the Roman Empire. The key to imperial stability lies not in military conquest but in creating shared prosperity and common identity among diverse populations. His plans called for standardized legal codes that would protect individual rights regardless of ethnic background, economic policies that would encourage trade and technological development, and cultural programs that would celebrate diversity while promoting imperial unity. But Sargon's visionary plans face an enemy more powerful than any human opposition: time itself. The great conqueror dies around 2279 before Christ, after a reign of 56 years that fundamentally transformed the ancient world. His death creates a succession crisis that tests whether his imperial innovations can survive without their creator's direct leadership. The reign of Sargon's sons reveals both the strengths and limitations of the Akkadian imperial system. Rimish and Manishtushu inherit their father's military skills and administrative abilities, successfully maintaining imperial unity and even expanding Akkadian influence into new territories. Archaeological evidence shows continued economic prosperity, ongoing construction projects, and sustained cultural development throughout their reigns. The empire seems to have successfully transitioned from the rule of its founding genius to institutional governance that can function regardless of individual leadership. The true test comes with the reign of Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, who faces challenges that would have tested even his legendary grandfather. A coalition of enemies forms along the empire's northern border, uniting peoples who had never before cooperated in a coordinated assault on Akkadian territory. Climate conditions worsen as the drought intensifies, creating refugee crises and economic disruption throughout the empire. Most critically, new technologies developed by enemies begin to challenge Akkadian military superiority for the first time since Sargon's original conquests. Naram-Sin's response demonstrates that he has inherited not just his grandfather's throne but also his innovative approach to seemingly impossible challenges. He implements military reforms that incorporate new weapons and tactics learned from enemy forces. He establishes the world's first systematic intelligence network, using merchants and diplomats to gather information about threats before they can fully develop. Most boldly, he declares himself a living god, using religious authority to strengthen political control during a period of unprecedented stress. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed the full extent of Naram-Sin's achievements, including military victories that extended Akkadian control further than ever before and administrative innovations that improved imperial efficiency even during the ongoing climate crisis. His famous victory stele, discovered at Susa, depicts not just military triumph but also the sophisticated logistical support that made such distant campaigns possible. Tablets from his reign show evidence of technological developments in metallurgy, engineering, and agriculture that helped the empire adapt to changing environmental conditions. Yet even Naram-Sin's remarkable abilities cannot entirely overcome the accumulated stresses facing the Akkadian Empire. The prolonged drought continues to undermine agricultural productivity throughout the region. New enemies, equipped with improved weapons and tactics learned from observing Akkadian methods, pose increasingly serious military challenges. Most significantly, the very success of Akkadian administration creates new problems as provincial populations develop their own administrative skills and begin to question the necessity of imperial oversight. The final crisis comes not from external invasion or internal rebellion, but from a combination of factors that overwhelm even the Akkadian Empire's sophisticated crisis management systems. Around 2154 before Christ, a confederation of mountain peoples called the Gudians launches coordinated attacks on multiple fronts simultaneously. These attacks coincide with harvest failures throughout the imperial heartland and with rebellions in several key provinces that have been weakened by decades of climate stress. And thus, this extraordinary journey through time reveals not merely the rise and fall of humanity's first empire, but also the timeless patterns of innovation, adaptation, and ultimate transformation that continue to shape civilizations 4,000 years later. The collapse of the Akkadian Empire in 2154 before Christ marks the end of humanity's first experiment in global governance, but its legacy echoes through every civilization that followed. When we examine the administrative tablets scattered across museums from London to Baghdad, when we trace the evolution of military tactics from ancient Mesopotamia to modern warfare, when we study the diplomatic protocols that still govern international relations today, we find fingerprints of innovations first developed in Sargon's palace over 4,000 years ago. The Babylonian Empire that eventually rose from Akkadian ruins did not create its legendary legal codes from nothing. Hammurabi's famous laws build directly upon Akkadian legal precedents, extending and refining judicial principles that Sargon's administrators had developed to govern diverse populations across vast distances. The concept of uniform justice regardless of ethnic background, the idea that imperial authority should protect individual rights, the notion that law should be written down and publicly displayed, all of these revolutionary concepts trace their origins to Akkadian innovations. Even more remarkably, recent archaeological discoveries reveal that Akkadian influences extended far beyond the boundaries of their empire and far beyond the time of their political control. Indus Valley sites contain artifacts bearing Akkadian administrative marks. Egyptian tomb paintings depict diplomatic ceremonies that follow protocols first established in Sargon's court. Hittite military formations mirror tactical innovations developed by Akkadian generals. The reach of this forgotten empire extended not just across space, but across time, influencing civilizations that arose centuries after Akkad itself had crumbled into dust. Perhaps the most profound legacy lies in what the Akkadian Empire revealed about human potential during times of crisis. When climate change threatened the survival of entire populations, Sargon's administrators developed systematic approaches to resource management and population relocation that modern disaster relief organizations still study today. When cultural differences threatened to tear apart their multi-ethnic empire, Akkadian diplomats pioneered techniques of cultural synthesis that allowed diverse peoples to maintain their identities while participating in a larger common project. The story of the Akkadian Empire also provides sobering lessons about the limits of human ambition and the fragility of even the most sophisticated civilizations. Despite their remarkable innovations, despite their military superiority, despite their administrative genius, the Akkadians could not ultimately overcome the combination of environmental stress, external pressure, and internal contradictions that eventually overwhelmed their system. Their collapse reminds us that no empire, no matter how powerful or well-organized, exists independently of the natural and social forces that shape human civilization. Yet in their failure, the Akkadians achieved something perhaps more important than permanent political control. They proved that it was possible for human beings to transcend the tribal loyalties and local identities that had previously defined civilization. They demonstrated that people from vastly different backgrounds could work together toward common goals. They showed that innovation and adaptation could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges, at least for a time. Modern DNA analysis of ancient remains found throughout the former Akkadian territories reveals something remarkable about the human legacy of this forgotten empire. The populations of modern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran all show genetic markers indicating significant population mixing that occurred during the Akkadian period and continued long after their political collapse. This biological evidence confirms what the historical record suggests. The Akkadian Empire created not just political unity, but genuine cultural and human connections that survived the empire itself. When we walk through the galleries of ancient Near Eastern art in museums around the world, when we read translations of cuneiform tablets that reveal the daily lives of people who lived 40 centuries ago, when we study satellite images that show the remains of irrigation systems still visible beneath the sands of Iraq, we are witnessing the enduring power of human creativity and ambition. The Akkadians may have failed to create a permanent empire, but they succeeded in expanding the boundaries of what human civilization could achieve. Their story resonates particularly strongly in our own era of global challenges and rapid change. Like Sargon's administrators, we face the challenge of managing diverse populations across vast distances. Like Naram-Sin's generals, we must adapt to new technologies and new forms of conflict. Like the Akkadian people during the Great Drought, we must find ways to maintain social cohesion and shared purpose during times of environmental and economic stress. The archaeological record suggests that human beings have always been capable of remarkable innovation when faced with existential challenges. The Akkadians developed the first professional armies, the first systematic administration of diverse populations, the first attempts at planned economic development across continental distances. Their successors in Babylon, Assyria, Persia, and Rome built upon these foundations, each adding their own innovations while preserving essential elements of what Sargon and his followers had originally created. Stories like these show us that the past is more alive than we ever imagined, and each archaeological discovery continues to reveal new connections between ancient innovation and modern challenges, reminding us that the human capacity for adaptation and achievement has remained remarkably consistent across the millennia. If you made it this far and aren't subscribed yet, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share in the comments which ancient civilization you'd like to explore next.